For coming to this webinar. It's very early. It's only 8 a.m. in Washington, D.C. time. That's because we have a very diverse panel, not just because of background, but also of time zones. We have people from Jakarta and Taipei and Washington, D.C. Today, our topic is foreign influence to Beijing's foreign resilience to Beijing's information influence, the view from Asia. The webinar is co-hosted by Freedom House, Radio Free Asia, and the Atlantic Council. All three organizations have worked on this topic extensively. For Freedom House, we published a large report called Beijing's Global Media Influence, in which we studied over 30 countries, Beijing's media influence in 30 countries, which was the project was led by Sarah Cook, who was the research director for China at the Freedom House. And obviously, Kento at the Atlantic Council is known for her work on Beijing's propaganda and disinformation work around the world, in Asia, in Africa, and elsewhere. And of course, as a Chinese native speaker, I read Radio Free Asia's Fact Check Lab on a daily basis. So I think this topic is going to be more and more important as Beijing ramp up its global disinformation campaign. And I hope going forward, we three organizations and our partners around the world will do more collaboration on this important issue. Now I'm going to hand the floor to Sarah Cook, who was my predecessor at Freedom House and also the lead of our project on Beijing's global disinformation campaign. So Sarah, up to you.
Thank you, Yacho, and thank you everyone for joining us. So as Yacho mentioned, if we look back at the last few years, the Chinese government, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, has really been accelerating this massive campaign to influence information around the world. And that can take a lot of forms. It can be propaganda, disinformation, censorship. We also looked at control over infrastructure. And I think in the global south, we see this a little bit more, but the export of attempts to export the Chinese Communist Party's own tactics for domestic information control to other countries. I think one of the things that we found when we were studying this in these 30 countries is that this reality is not a one-way street. And there's actually a little bit of kind of good news in this space in terms of the extent to which the success of Beijing's efforts, even as they become more sophisticated and more covert in some cases, can and often are curtailed by creative and thoughtful work, especially by independent media and civil society. And so I'm really pleased that today we have an opportunity to talk to some experts and some activists, some people really working on the front lines, especially in Asia, which because of the geography is on the front lines of Beijing's foreign media influence efforts, and to really hear from them, how they are think about this issue, how they think about this space, what are some things that they and their teams have done to counter this, and what more needs to be done, because as we all can see, the Chinese Communist Party is investing a lot of time, resources, and, to be honest, money in this effort. So let me introduce the panelists real quick, and then we're going to dive in. The structure today will be we'll dive into a few rounds of moderated discussion. We'll all be asking everybody questions on some different themes. We will have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end, closer to 9 a.m. New York or Washington, D.C. time for questions and answers. And you can see that there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So please do feel free, even throughout, to jot your questions in there, and we'll try to get to them at the end. So first, I'm very pleased that we're joined by Kenton Thibault. Kenton is a senior resident fellow for China at the Atlantic Council, and she particularly works at the Digital Forensic Research Lab there. She's head of the China research on these issues and a key investigator on some of the projects focused on China's role in the global technology ecosystem and China's foreign policy priorities when it comes especially to the digital domain. We're also joined by Muhammad Zulfikar Rahmat. He's the director, he's based in Indonesia, and he's the director of the China-Indonesia desk at a think tank called the Center of Economic and Law Studies. And I got to know Muhammad when we were working on our project because he served as the Indonesia researcher. And he's been doing a lot of work, initially more focused on the Middle East, but increasingly focused on the ways in which the Chinese government is influencing media and political discourse in Indonesia in particular. We're joined also by C.T. Lee, who's the director of the Asia Fact Check Lab, a recent initiative by Radio Free Asia that aims to combat disinformation, debunk rumors that go viral and other conspiracy theories, but also tracking and exposing foreign influence campaigns that lie behind those specific snippets of disinformation that we might see. And CT himself is a veteran reporter and editor in the Chinese language space. Last but not least, adding to our kind of global distribution here of speakers is Maxim Terashenko, who's the co-founder and CEO of Mantis Analytics, which is an AI-powered risk management platform. And he's a longstanding IT specialist who, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, shifted to working on enhancing institutional resilience against disinformation and influence campaigns, and more recently has been trying to do a little bit more work on Taiwan's informational security. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I think we are going to start a little bit before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the resilience to just get a better sense for all of you from where you're sitting of the Chinese regime's influence tactics and how you each approach trying to respond to that. So Kenton, let's start with you. If you need to give a quick snapshot of how you see the current state of the Chinese Communist Party's foreign information influence and the tactics being deployed, especially in Asia, how would you kind of give a quick snapshot of where things stand right now?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. So first, I'd say that China's priorities in Asia stem from a few major core issues or drivers, and I'll name 4 here. So first is undermining U.S. presence in the region, as well as partnerships, alliances, or agreements that can be seen as uniting against China or China's interests, and really depicting these partnerships as destabilizing Asia. Just as an example, we found that in the first half of 2022, for example, Japan and Taiwan accounted for about half of the PRC propaganda towards U.S. partners in the Indo-Pacific. And this includes Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, India, and Australia, among others. We also saw a major narrative push around the nuclear submarine agreement between the U.S., the UK, and Australia with AUKUS, with both official messaging and inauthentic accounts on global social media spreading narratives that the agreement undermined non-proliferation efforts. And this was followed by a lot of messaging in the region on the Fukushima incident in Japan and how Japan is responsible for nuclear waste contaminating the surrounding area. Number 2 is spreading positive messages of China's largesse, its governance system, and the stability of its system in comparison to the failings of democracy, and especially the failure of U.S. global leadership. So we did an analysis from January to June 2023 and found that the top 44 narratives of PRC government affiliated accounts on the platform X showed that there were kind of 3 major narrative trends. One is talking about Beijing's global leadership. So about 33% of top campaigns on global social media focused on promoting Beijing's position as a global leader, and really touting its different global security initiatives, global civilization initiatives, etc. The second theme was anti-US narratives. About 23% of the top global focus campaigns focused on denigrating and disparaging the US, including the functioning of democracy. This focused on the US Summit for Democracy, accusing the US of human rights violations. And then lastly, foreign leaders' visits to China. About a fifth of global focus campaigns focused on highlighting foreign leaders' visits to China as a way to promote its image as a global leader and a promoter of cooperation and peace and security. And these include posts highlighting visits from the prime ministers of New Zealand, Singapore, and Malaysia, for example. Third is eroding the sovereignty claims of other countries to the South China Sea in order to expand China's ability to establish legal rights over its claims. An example of this is the Philippines South China Sea incident from March to June, culminating in the PRC's violent boarding of a Philippine vessel. The propaganda around this event globally was that China's Coast Guard was defending its claims lawfully and with restraint, and that Manila was provoking Beijing with illegal incursions at the behest of the US. Lastly, engaging the diaspora both in the form of transnational repression, so seeking to censor and quiet critics abroad, but also trying to mobilize them in favor of China's issues, especially in countries with a sizable Chinese diaspora, or what they define as diaspora. So an example of this is in Singapore. In 2022, Singapore issued a statement condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And in response, there was this kind of groundswell of Chinese language disinformation from mainland registered public accounts on WeChat criticizing the move and urging Singaporeans of Chinese descent to protest. So I'd say those are kind of the four main drivers, and hopefully can provide some sort of scene setting before our amazing panelists get into kind of the granularity of what they're seeing on the ground.
Thanks so much, Kenton. Yeah, I think you really see the breadth of the different dynamics of what's happening here. So Mohammed, let's talk to you. Can you, kind of zooming in a little bit more on the Indonesia situation, can you talk a little bit about how you see either these same tactics or other tactics playing out in Indonesia, and maybe talk a little bit about the work that you and your colleagues have been doing to try to counter and address that in the country?
All right, thank you, Shara. So first thing is about the narrative. So the narrative that China is trying to push forward in Indonesia are two aspects. The first is sending positive message that the Belt and Road Initiative investment are beneficial for the people in Indonesia. And why this is important for China, because over the past years we've seen that Chinese investment, especially in the nickel industry, have resulted in a huge environmental and societal impact. So China sees the need to send positive narrative that Chinese investment are beneficial for Indonesia. The second thing is, because Indonesia is a Muslim majority country, they see the need to address the issue of Xinjiang. So the narrative that they've been trying to push forward is the idea that Chinese policy towards Uyghur in Xinjiang are justified, that it is part of counter-terrorism effort, that Islam in China is very peaceful, and so on and so forth. So those are the two main narratives that China is trying to push forward. When it comes to the strategies that China has been using, the first one is content sharing agreement with a number of media in Indonesia, both at the national and at the provincial level. The second thing is inviting journalists to visit China, and upon the return, they're asked to write articles that are, in line with Chinese propaganda stance. And then the third one, I think one of the most interesting thing when it comes to Indonesia is that China has been trying to establish a closer relationship with Muslim organizations. In Indonesia, Muslim organizations play a very important role in Indonesian politics. And I think China understands this very well, and they've been trying to invite Muslim scholars to visit the so-called Xinjiang, and this works. I mean, to some extent, many scholars, upon the return, they've been saying that nothing happens in Xinjiang, everything is good, and so on and so forth. So this is what China has been doing when it comes to trying to send the positive messages. Another thing is, of course, they use money, especially when it comes to Muslim organization. They've been providing donations For example, iftar during Ramadan, like breakfasting. There've been several events on breakfasting that have been supported by the Chinese embassy in Indonesia. And our organization has been like, for us, we've been trying to counter this through several ways. Number one is by publishing and spreading awareness. The second thing that we do is a workshop, especially for journalists and media organizations. Thanks to Freedom House as well for supporting us on this. And the third one is we've been giving what we call as a technical assistant to local government. So over the years, China has been coming to Indonesia not only through Jakarta, but directly to Indonesian provinces. And this local government usually have no idea on what the Belt and Road Initiative is. They don't know what China is doing. So China has been utilizing this as an opportunity to get to establish their foothold in Indonesian provinces. So we've been giving technical assistance to local government across Indonesia, and in basically providing them with more understanding about China, and then assisting them in creating legislation and policies that are beneficial for both parties. And the last thing that we do right now is based on our colleague in Taiwan. We've been creating the China Indonesia Provincial Index. So basically measuring Chinese influence across 38 Indonesian provinces, and this will be launched very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Wow, that's quite a job. I think Freedom House has over the years thought about trying to do things related to individual US states, and that subnational dimension is really interesting. And I think working also with Mohammed on the project we had done, I think when you see the way different tactics play out in different spaces, in Indonesia, a lot of it is it's online, but it's offline. It's a lot of these connections and working with local organizations and kind of trying to get influence over local officials. And some of that translates into content in the digital space as well. We didn't see, I think, as much of the type of inauthentic behavior as we see in other places. But now turning to CT Lee, so he's going to give us a snapshot of what he's seeing, because he's very much particularly focused on the digital space and some of these more particularly organized and targeted influence operations. So go ahead, CT.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a bit about your work and some of the examples you've seen?
Sure, of course. And good morning, everyone. And I would like to introduce the Asia Fact Check Lab firstly. We are a department of Radio Free Asia. We established in October 2022. Our main goal is to fact-check fake news manipulated by authoritarian government in East Asia, and of course, China is included. We publish fact-check reports and also use in-depth and investigative reporting to uncover the impact of this government's political propaganda on region politics. While there are many excellent fact-checking organizations in Taiwan and other Asian countries, but Asia Fact Check Lab is the only one dedicated to analyzing and verifying the false political information and the propaganda from authoritarian states. And in the beginning, I want to share our experience in Taiwan presidential election 2024, because it just happened, and we found something interesting in the election campaign. Actually, In most investigation and reports on spreading of misinformation, you may see similar conclusions. Taiwan is one of the countries most severely affected by misinformation in global. Some quantitatively ranking even place Taiwan at the top, at the number one. And that's why in early 2024, Taiwan went through a presidential election. Such an election cannot escape the influence of this or misinformation. We found that information impacted in three main areas. First is spreading skepticism on unreliable American. The second, supporting candidates with the position aligned with China. The third is attacking or slandering democratic institutions. And the first, I start from spreading skepticism on unreliable American. United States support in the most is the most crucial factor for Taiwan national defense and security. Therefore, undermining Americans' security commitment to Taiwan or interpretation policy or cooperation is the primary focus of fake news. I can give you an exclusive example uncovered by us. In early July 2023, the United Daily News, this is a newspaper with over 17 years history in Taiwan, reported that Taiwan was secretly developing biochemical weapons with the United States. The report was based on a so-called government meeting record, and it published photos of the original document. Developing biochemical weapons not only violated the international convention, but has been a reason for declaring war in history. So we think it is a very serious situation. So we checked the meeting record and almost certainly determined it is to be fabricated. Taiwanese prosecutor also launched an investigation and concluded that the meeting record was fake. But there was no evidence that the United Daily News reporters fabricated it. So subsequently, United Daily News apologized to the public for the verification fail, and the apology is still available online. And the second, I want to talk about the supporting candidate aligned with China. We also discovered a local collaboration in Taiwan where manufacturing fake information to help political parties and the candidates with the position aligned with China gain an advantage in the election campaign. We found that this local collaborators was driven by false commercial interest and ideology. Here's another example. On December 1st, 2023, 42 days before the election, a local media outlet in Taiwan published a poor result claiming that the KMT candidate's support had surpassed his opponent. It means the DPP candidate. But our investigation revealed that the poll was not conducted using proper method. At the same time, Taiwanese prosecutor also investigated and found that the poll was entirely fabricated. And the Chinese Communist Party Taiwan Affairs Office had paid the media outlets head, according to prosecutor's accusation. This is the second part. And the third part is slandering democratic institution. Around the time about 2024 presidential election, we and other fact-checking organizations or research institutions in Taiwan uncovered numerous pieces of misinformation, spreading ideas like voter fraud, cheating, and Taiwan's democracy is a joke, something like that. This situation was particularly severe after the election result was announced, with social media circulating information about region voting led to doubt about the election fairness and impacting voters' confidence. Platforms like X, TikTok, and Facebook, we saw foreign accounts, especially from China, sharing the spreading his content to influence public judgment. Here, I will show you a very, very short, brief example. You don't need to understand what they said. I will explain it. Okay, let me share it. Okay. Okay, let me explain what happened in the video. This case was uncovered by Taiwan's well-known think tank Doublethink Lab. You may see the two short video combined together, and in left is a gentleman, and in right and the women in the right. Both of them are well-known influencers. When they play those two, when we play these two short videos simultaneously, we may find that they are alike, no matter in camera angles, the editing style, and their lines. So obviously, they share the same script, and they are talking about just as I introduced previously, Taiwan's democratic is a joke. The vote is cheating, but they use the same script. And say the something and publish almost in the same time. So I think, or we think, it's a coordinated information warfare effort rather than the influencers own commentary. So this is the three part of I share the experience in Taiwan election campaign.
Thank you, CT. And yeah, I think when you really see things side by side, or when you look at how particular wording is used over and over, it's hard to believe that it's just a coincidence. So Maxim, you've worked mostly in Ukraine, but you have spent some time in Taiwan. And I think you've also focused more on some of the technological tools that are available to counter these types of authoritarian information operations. Can you talk a little bit about that, and any examples you have you can share, especially from the Asian context?
Yeah, sure. Like, first of all, hi all, and thanks for having me here. And I will start from some short introduction, like who we are. Like, we are a Ukrainian-born startup, which was born like after like beginning of full invasion of Russia, and we are focusing on technology, like specifically we are helping organization to manage informational risks with using big data, AI, and such kind of things. So that is like first. The second is parallels that we have with the situation in Taiwan, in Ukraine, because I visited like Global Leadership Forum organized by Kuma Academy in May, and just I feeling like absolutely the same, which I felt like 1 month before like war actually started in Ukraine. And it's really like crazy feeling, right? Because like people like are exhausted in this expectation on like war will begin in like soon, right? But it's not already started. Like, I mean, in terms of like physical military operation, but it's already started in informational space, like actively, and that is like a huge thing. And so we are pretty in the same condition, and in this case, as a company, for sure, like we are focused like mostly on Russian informational space, but we did a big partnership project with like as City said, like famous think tank from Taiwan, Double Think, and we just asked us like very simple question, like how like Beijing and Moscow propaganda is aligned on Taiwan question, and we now analyze like huge amount of data, right? And in short words, yes, it's aligned in terms of narratives and so on. So, and there are some kind of conclusion from this research. Like, first of all, like Russian influences and information disseminators are very cautious, like with respect on Taiwan question. The second insight that, yeah, it's like a hugely organized. It's not only like one channel of distribution, right? It's a lot of Telegram channels, Facebook groups, YouTube, and some of these channels just mask it somehow, and so on. In this case, it's like it's difficult to analyze that without using of technology, because like these threat actors, they using technology at all, right, in organization of such kind of campaigns. The next insight that like majority of strategic narratives like employed by Russian on Taiwan questions like are coming from China, even like comparison with Ukraine. Like some narratives are like pretty the same. That means that they're in touch, right? It's not coincidence, right? It's some kind of collaboration and cooperation work. And also, like, we don't see any Taiwan position here. It's absent, like at all. Like it's a feeling that there is like no Taiwan and so on. It's very dangerous signal. Yeah. So just to summarize, we see like direct correlation between like Chinese propaganda and Russian propaganda in terms of narrative, in terms of organization, and also using technology, right? In this case, we need like to do some effective confrontation with such kind of propaganda. We need also use technology actively and effectively, right, in analysis and like contradiction to such kind of huge propaganda machines.
Thanks, Maxim. So the next set of questions I wanted to ask each of you is, on the one hand, there's this, it's so incredible how many resources are being devoted to this from the Chinese government's side. If you could each maybe say like one victory, like a win, where you see like a real impact and success, and maybe it's a small thing where like Muhammad changes the understanding of a local official or something like that, but maybe it's something bigger. And then maybe you could each speak to, one of the main challenges that you face in your work. So Muhammad, why don't we start with you? So what's like one win that really comes to mind, one or two, and then what you see kind of as the main challenges right now as you're working in this space?
All right, thank you, Shara. I think the win is mostly comes from the technical assistance that we've been giving to the local governments, where not only that they have a different perception when it comes to China's role in Indonesia, but also in the way in which they are trying to modify the local legislation. So we've been focusing mostly in the regency called Morowali, and Morowali is a regency that is rich in nickel, and China has been dominating the region for some time. And now they are creating a new legislation that is aim to diversify the economy, moving away from nickel-based industry to other sectors, which I think it's one of the wins that we get from our initiative. I think the main challenge that we face in Indonesia is the Cold War mentality that people still have. Like, if I'm working on China or countering things that China has been doing, people have this idea that, yeah, you are pro the US, you are pro the West, and there is some kind of question like, why are you focusing on China and so on and so forth instead of other countries? So that has been our main challenge. But we've been telling them, like, my research is on China. That's the only thing that we know. Of course, I cannot do research in about other countries because China has been my main focus of research. And the second thing that I always say is that we criticize everyone. We criticize any negative impact that are resulted from any investment in our country. And it just happened that I've been focusing on China, so I've been critical of what China has been doing in Indonesia.
Thank you, Mohammed. That's very, very interesting. I think especially the fact that legislation or like actual policy changes are really happening that enhance resilience. That's really encouraging. So CT, I think in your opening comments, you gave a few examples of, things you exposed and then the prosecutor took notice. But are there any other, are there other points you want to make in terms of kind of wins and victories from the work you're doing, especially in terms of maybe public opinion or attention some of your work is getting? And then similar to the question, Mohammed, what do you see as some of the main challenges that you're facing?
Actually, I don't I can't think of any point that we can declare the win, so-called win. I just feel the challenge. Actually, there is a typhoon coming into Taiwan, and I think the AI is the incoming typhoon for us, for a fact checker. And I would like you use a metaphor like this. In the past, fact-checking reports were like detective novels. There was always only one truth. But with AI-generated content, the result of fact-checking have turned into a percentage and the probabilities. It means that when we fact-check AI-generated content, we rely on digital tools. In fact, there are many such tools available online, developed and operated on different principles. However, the problem is that no single tool can be guaranteed 100% accuracy in determining whether suspicious content is true or false. But of course, we can see many reports on AI-generated content. They were given certain verdict, but it's usually when it's clearly identifiable to the human eyes. However, as AI advanced, this obvious flaw will be quickly improved, I think so. Another example, when Taiwan's current president, I would give you another example. When Taiwan's current president Lai Ching-te was elected, a recording emerged in Chinese social media, purportedly of him severely criticizing former President Tsai Ing-wen, who they belong to the same parties. This recording paired with visual circulated widely on social media. Several tools indicated a 50 to 60 probability that the recording was AI generated, but it's meaningless for us because that we have to fact check the distribution path. We found that the earliest spreader were well-known Chinese influencers notorious for spreading misinformation. We also identified several YouTube accounts created so only for the disseminated this recording. Ultimately, we conclude that the recording was likely fake by analyzing the content and the distribution path in the both way. But again, we cannot make sure that this recording is 100% fake. So I think the AI is it's our main challenge in the future.
Thank you, CT. Maxim, so I mean, actually, that would be very interesting to hear your thoughts and experiences. And honestly, any lessons learned, I think both on the point about what is generative AI's impact, but also I think, CT, that's really interesting, that combination of both the technical tools and the distribution that makes it be able to say with more certainty that this is really suspicious content. So Maxim, any thoughts or lessons learned that you can share?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I will start from some wins, because I think we need to have a wins to make our mood higher and so on and following tough situation. And some perspective from Ukraine, because in parallel with Taiwan, we are in the center of world informational confrontation. And what I think we did good that we do some kind of mobilization and building internal partnership between IT sector, between government, between fact checkers, also some kind of international partnership, because we need to promote narratives that it's a global problem, and as much people will be involved in that, as better for everybody. And the second win, I think it's crowd involvement, volunteer involvement, student efforts involvement, because you can do as a student, you can do a small thing per day. You just can report on one post in Facebook that is disinformation. It's just a few clicks, but you participated in something big, right? And for example, as a company, we organized a hackathon in Ukraine just specifically to fight with the disinformation using AI with 170 participants. It was absolutely cool event, right? And I think we need to make it cool for young people. Just if you fight with the disinformation, is using technology and so on, you participating in something cool, right? In something really important for the world. That's why we do continuously lectures in institutes. We involve students and so on. Yeah, so just make it cool. About challenges, I think yeah, it's very related what CT already said before. And I can remember book Alice in Wonderland, that to stay in place you need to run, right? And that exactly situations that we have with this disinformation, AI and so on, because AI is actively using by all these threats, and they much ahead of us. Yeah, let's say a truth, right? In this case, just to stay on the place, to do some effective confrontation, we need to run as a community, as a professionals, and because yes, they already make it better. I mean, in terms of quality of this such kind of disinformation campaigns. In case of quality of video, in case dangerous narratives they are spreading, we see how quality of these actions is really increased, comparing with the beginning of full invasion, right? And now, in this case, there is no time just to relax, right? So we need to improve our technology, improve our methodology, continuously do international collaboration with that, exchange knowledge. and do some kind of standards in industry, right? What is like deepfake video? How we can mark this deepfake video? How we can recognize that it's deepfake video? How we can recognize that this text is like format from some kind of language model and so on. All of these questions are still open for industry and for everybody who involved, right? There is no simple answer. In this case, we need like very actively, we need to very actively work on that, right? And only using that we can be effective in this contradiction with this organizing like disinformational attacks.
Thank you, Maxim. So Kenta, kind of coming back to you, you got a bit of a kind of bigger picture of what's happening both globally and in Asia, as well as kind of being in the trenches sometimes on the technical side. What do you see as kind of the state of some of the resilience, especially in Asia, and the role that these projects play, as well as what some of the challenges are, whether it's AI related or otherwise?
Yeah, so I would say that as we heard from our panelists, like these kinds of initiatives work, and they are building resilience and awareness. I think there's a couple of things just from the government side, and I'm speaking kind of from the U.S. government side, to do, not just the U.S. government, but that can actually support these organizations in doing their work, which is where I see the best role for government. So like one specific and one more broad. So specifically just increasing funding for civil society and non-governmental organizations focused on capacity building and research on countering PRC weaponization of the information environment. As part of a global strategy, the US should really support civil society organizations that focus on understanding and training people to understand PRC influence. Empowering civil society groups to strengthen safeguards through investment screenings, transparency regulations, and information resilience, rather than kind of putting it in terms of US-China competition, which we do see a lot, could be a pretty good avenue for getting civil society organizations on board. I think also a core essential part of this is also supporting the entry of, newer civil society organizations or grassroots organizations into the US government sub-grantee process. A lot of times you can only really get funding if you have previous experience on managing USG grants. And, as we know, there's a lot of money earmarked in the US government right now for countering PRC influence. But to get to this money, you have to have had previous experience on managing USG grants, which can be really a major barrier for, other US-based organizations and partnering with, civil society organizations on the ground. So really being aware of this and really focusing on it as, needing to kind of expand access for other civil society organizations, newer ones that are really kind of focused on this issue should be kind of a priority, especially if this topic is of relatively new focus in many geographic regions. And so you don't have maybe organizations with a history of being able to manage a grant for this kind of topic. So that's very specific. But secondly, more broadly, I think that helping to promote a free, open, and interoperable internet globally is a core national interest of the US and is also a huge part of this resilience building effort and enabling other organizations to build resilience. So as such, it's important to really ensure civil society is well represented in multi-stakeholder forums on internet governance, for example. We see authoritarian efforts to undo this multi-stakeholder system in current initiatives like the UN Global Digital Compact, where China is very active in trying to get G77 countries to sign on to its principles for internet governance, making it much more multilateral, shutting out civil society. And we all know what happens when you try to shut out civil society in these conversations. We get to the tricky area of the government kind of being the arbiter of, rights online and harms. And so really focusing on, helping to have civil society representation in this forum is important. Focusing on connectivity, digital inclusion, and development at these forums could undercut this, well-funded Chinese strategy of taking advantage of global frustrations to advance its internet in a less open and more its interest in a more in a less open and more authoritarian friendly internet. So those are just kind of two, one specific, one broad ways that government can really support these organizations doing this work and building resilience.
Thanks, Kenton. And to be honest, I think when we were doing our research, we found the resilience side. Some initiatives, like some of the ones we've talked about today, that were very focused specifically on, this push coming from the PRC. In other cases, there was a lot of payoff from longstanding work on press freedom laws and investigative reporting and having people who can do, FOIA, like freedom of information requests. And then those people locally have that capacity just more generally, as like Mohammed was saying, as you see entities from the PRC starting to encroach on freedoms locally, that being able to be activated. So it seems like you really need both of those sides. You need that kind of generic, and you need also the very specialized, because as we can hear, there's some very specific, particular expertise that you need when you're dealing, in terms of China. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction just before we turn to the Q&A. So maybe each of our other speakers could say briefly, what's one thing you think that whether it's governments, whether it's the United States or the European Union, but government entities could do, philanthropists or others, to support your work or work of people like you in the spaces that you're working. So Maxim, and in terms of this particular challenge in Asia. So maybe Maxim, why don't you start with what's one solution that you'd like to see or support from outside just the innovations of your own organization that you think could help?
Yeah, sure. It's a very important question, and I will start to build some. We name it like as bridge initiatives. I mean, we represent like IT sector, right? How to quickly to work with the government, how to prove our technology, how to help with the technology and do it quickly. We do not have 7 years for bureaucracy, right? In this case, like one thing that we need to do, we need to make some kind of fast track bridge initiatives between like different types of organizations, between government and IT sectors, between IT sector and institutes, between like think tanks and IT sector, and so on. It should be such kind of machine should work very effectively and very quickly, and also like not only in borders of one country or region, like internationally, right? Because now what we see in the world, it's a big polarization, right? Last 2 years, like basically the democracy with dictatorship, and in this case, such kind of cooperation should be built across the whole democracy world, not inside like one country or one region. As much effective we will build this relationship, I think it's better.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential I think between that public-private dimension of how do you get the private sector, both in terms of resources and expertise, to work closely with civil society or with governments. CT, what's your wish list? What's on your wish list?
Yes. Actually, I would wish or hope the United States government or the EU in the legislation or bring up the platform responsibility in AI. Just because we Taiwan is our situation is Taiwan is a very small country, and the Facebook doesn't register it in Taiwan. The TikTok doesn't register it in Taiwan, no matter you think it is a Chinese company or Singapore company. So Taiwan is very hard to access something to the big platform, especially in the AI generated content. But I think as I just said, AI is the it's a severe challenge. So I think promoting legislation to increase the responsibility of online platform in regulating AI content is essential. Platform and the social media must act as gatekeepers for AI-generated content, particularly sensitive politics and conflict-related content. So they should be required to fact check, to label, and when necessary, remove from the content. But this this legislation could be only could be in EU or in the United States. In the big country, make it possible, but not in Taiwan. That's it.
Thank you, CT. And Mohammed, what do you think more could be done to help groups like yours or others in the region working on this type of issue?
Yeah, I think, yeah, as people mentioned, funding is one thing, but I think in the context of Indonesia, we are increasingly seeing the importance of providing legal protection for activists and researchers working on the ground, because not only those like us focusing on China, but also NGOs focusing on environment, because Chinese investment have been impacting society tremendously in terms of environment. A lot of NGOs focusing on environment have also been working on empowering the communities impacted, and many of them have received threats from Chinese companies. They have received protests from several Chinese entities. Many journalists have actually received threats from Chinese embassy to take down their writings because it's considered to be, anti-China, and so on. So I think legal protection is very important from the government as well as from other relevant stakeholders. So, yeah, so I think when it comes to Indonesia, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important now to work from the grassroots. So a lot of researchers have been focusing more on publishing, working at the top, but they forget to work at the bottom. They work at the grassroots. And in order, I think increasingly, however, there are many organizations that have been interested to work with the people on the ground. But I think besides, apart from funding, they need legal protection in continuing with what they're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you, everyone. So we do have a few questions from the audience. I think one that we haven't touched on as much and is raised here relates to the ethnic Chinese diasporas around Asia and how what's happening in this space, really affects them. Some are Chinese speakers, some are not, right? The question here is, are there specific tactics or tools that are being used by China-linked actors to target diaspora communities? And what particularly unique challenges as well as solutions, I think, that presents. I see you nodding. So why don't you give that a go first, and then we can see if anyone else wants to chime in.
Yes. By this question, I want to. I think I have. I may introduce a project. By us, because we has AFCL, we has a long focus on influence of Chinese political propaganda in the region, particularly on ethnic Chinese community, To this end, we have designed and executed a long-term project. In 2023, in collaboration with a Taiwan think tank, Doublethink Lab, we conducted a survey and on-ground interview in New Zealand and Malaysia. We want to explore the media consumption behavior of local Chinese diaspora and the relationship between media use and the political orientation. In 2024, we carry out a similar project in Singapore. This investigation revealed that these countries, if Chinese community primarily consume news from Chinese media, their stance on critical political events tend to align closely with the Chinese government's official position. And I want to raise Singapore. Singapore is a very interesting case because Singapore government tightly control local media, the internet, but the internet and the Chinese social media platform like WeChat and Weibo serve as a crucial channels for breaking controls of Singapore government and spreading Chinese perspective, open managed by a new and some new media on the internet often managed by new immigrants from China. This is a very interesting case we found in Singapore.
Muhammad or Ken, does anyone want to?
Yes.
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
So in Indonesia, we have a significant number of Chinese diaspora, and of course, when it comes to Chinese investment, there have been investment that are facilitated by Chinese diaspora because, as many people know, perhaps in Indonesian economy, Chinese Indonesian play a very important role. Different departments from our center did a study on Indonesian tycoons, and most of them are Chinese Indonesian. And the way in which China has been trying to somehow quote unquote influence them is through Chinese language newspapers. So in Indonesia, they have a number of Chinese language newspapers and tabloids, and some of them have signed agreements with Chinese state media, and the narratives that are being pushed out by this media are in line with Chinese state. That's the first. The second thing is through event, especially cultural events. So in Indonesia, we have the celebration of Chinese New Year, and so on and so forth. And many Chinese Indonesian have been doing this over the years. But in recent years, with the implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative, we find that many of these events are receiving support directly from Chinese embassy. And in those events, usually several narrative are being pushed out, like Chinese investment are, as I mentioned, are beneficial for the Indonesian people and so on and so forth. So in the Indonesian context, I see these two methods, getting closer to Indonesian news or having cooperation with Chinese language newspapers, and the second thing is supporting specific events like the celebration of Chinese New Year.
Thanks, Muhammad. Yeah, in our research, I think you see this in Taiwan, you see in Malaysia, this element of also business people who own the Chinese language media in particular, having business interests in China or having ties there, and that also being one of the ways in which the broader media content gets influenced. CT, go ahead and add anything you want.
Yes, I just add something because in Chinese propaganda toward the diaspora in the other country, if you are ethnic Chinese in the propaganda, in the Chinese narrative, you are Chinese. So they didn't separate the ethnic Chinese and the citizen of Chinese. It means you have to loyal to your motherland, to your motherland rather than your country like Singapore, Malaysia, or Indonesia. So this is a kind of ideology, and a lot of Chinese people buy it. I think that is a very maybe interesting or maybe terrible thing about this issue.
Kenton, go ahead.
Yeah, so just building on what everyone said, China has always been, very interested in its diaspora and sees it as, basically a way to kind of advocate for Chinese interests abroad and political interests abroad. In 2018, the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office was merged with the United Front Work Department, so that the kind of the mandate of the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office is that of the United Front Work Department, which is, basically representing Chinese interests and propagating Chinese interests abroad. So you can see how this is just very much linked within the bureaucracy. But also I want to say that this has really taken on, China's focus on the diaspora has really taken on increasing salience in recent years, especially in Asia, as it has come to see US efforts to kind of build coalitions in Asia, to kind of build partnerships in the Indo-Pacific and in Asia specifically, and seeing this as kind of an existential threat, and seeing it as like really kind of tightening the noose around China's neck in Asia and containing it. So as it sees this kind of existential threat of the US in Asia and constraining its ability to operate, it's really doubled down on its efforts to kind of mobilize the diaspora, reach out to the diaspora to see if they can, mobilize them for China's interest, to kind of mitigate what's happening with US influence, but also to really double down on transnational repression and to silence any critics of the regime. And so, there's this kind of double-edged sword where the CCP views the diaspora as potentially, advocating for its interest, but also the diaspora are really the kind of the frontline victims often of transnational repression. So that's kind of like a context, a contextual point to make.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I would just add, I think it goes sometimes even beyond transnational oppression against individuals, but what we see a lot of times is the silencing of attempts within the Chinese diaspora to create media entities, to create just a WeChat account that's sharing, like we spoke with one, I think she was like an American Chinese student from the US, and like tried to create a WeChat account that just included content, say organizations from Freedom House were doing alongside BBC, alongside RFA. And because WeChat, which is so widely used, is owned by Tencent, which is a China-based company, it was shut down. But you have Chinese diaspora, more independent outlets in Australia, their advertisers get harassed. There was a case we saw in Malaysia where actually the Malaysian government was co-opted to not issue a license to an independent or more critical Chinese language news outlet. So I think that really is that two-edge that isn't always necessarily only those types of attacks that we see on individuals, but actually on institutions within the Chinese diaspora that are trying to lend a voice that's more independent from Beijing. I think that's that's some of the sets of voices that's just so important, whether it's the US government or other governments, to make sure that they can really hear from. So we're almost out of time. Actually, a lot of the other questions were addressed. There were a lot of questions about AI and things like that. Before we wrap up, first of all, thank you. Before we wrap up, I want to give you each like 1 minute of what do you think is coming next? I think we talked about AI, but maybe, whether it's something very specific, but what should people really be watching for if we're looking for this next year, this next 2 years? Kenton, why don't we start with you in terms of what you think might be coming next that we should watch for?
Sure, I'll just say an increasing focus on driving narratives that are already polarizing within an information context. That's kind of a newer tactic we've seen China do, and I would kind of keep an eye on that rather than just sowing positive narratives.
Muhammad, what do you see coming next?
Well, I think related to AI issue, as China has increasingly also trying to push its cyber activism through hacking and other methods of in the cyber world, cyber space. So I think in the next coming years we will see this more apparent, more and more apparent, especially in the context of Indonesia, because this is also related to the issue of the South China Sea, where China has been using this method to gather more intelligent data and information.
Thank you, Muhammad. Maxim, any thoughts on what you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, sure. Like, first of all, I think everybody understands that we enter in super turbulent, super intensive time, and there is a new era of confrontation. What we see, like in Ukraine, it's like super hybrid war, right? Which everything is coming in parallel. I mean, physical confrontation, informational confrontation, like cyber confrontation, and so on, and everything is really based on technology, involvement of technology. And so basically we see like every like month, every week, like new types of threats are coming, right? And for a lot of such kind of threats, we do not have an answer, right? In this case, yeah, we should really go ahead. We should effectively use technology. We should build a really effective international partnership to fight with that.
And CT, what do you see coming?
Yes, about AI, I think the education matters, and I think it's a time to bring up the concept of AI literacy. Because just as I said, AI is an incoming typhoon. So I think we must emphasize AI literacy within the media literacy. Traditionally, we talk about media literacy, but it's time to emphasize the AI literacy. AI literacy means keeping public alert and asking crucial questions about content, especially the visual content, and making them alert and ask some question about that. What are AI's capability now in text, in image, and in videos? And is the source of news clear? And they may ask, does the news report including fact-checking process? Does the news come from the social media platform or official media website or apps? And these channels trustworthy? I think we have to educate the public again and again, especially the especially the student in the school. I think it's a long-term solution for the problem we see now. Thank you.
Thank you, CT. That's a relatively optimistic note, I think to end on. And I think we were really talking a lot today about the resilience, but what I think to me comes out is the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing and the extent to which generative AI in particular can really be a tool to further increase some of the threats stemming in this space and to the information environment generally. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to all the participants who stayed on either late at night in Asia or early in the morning here on the East Coast. And thank you very much to all of our speakers. There was one question about whether this was being recorded and it'll be available. It will be available. Please check, later at the Freedom House website or Freedom House's YouTube channel, and you'll be able to find it there for those who want to look at it again or share it. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good rest of your day or good night for those of you in Asia.
Thank you, bye.
Yes, thank you.